I was raised Catholic. Sunday mornings, the smell of incense, the quiet of a pew, the soft murmur of prayers. I knew the stories, the saints, the rituals, but I wouldn't really call myself religious today. Then one day, I stumbled across something that made me stop in my tracks. Kenneth Copeland. The scene plays out on a television interview. A journalist asks him, straight-faced, why he refuses to fly commercial. Copeland leans back and says, "I don't want to get in a tube with a bunch of demons." I blinked. Did he just say demons? He quickly clarified, humans aren't demons, but we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. And yet, the camera pans to him in front of a massive Gulfstream jet, part of a fleet he owns. His $7 million mansion, his private airport, his boathouse, all funded by the donations of thousands who follow him faithfully. This wasn't just a preacher, this was an empire. And as I dug deeper, I found I wasn't alone in this. Jesse Duplantis, who proudly defends his own private jets, often appears alongside Copeland. Creflo Dollar, another televangelist, famously asked his congregation to fund a $65 million jet, and the audience cheered. Joel Osteen, with his massive Houston-based Lakewood Church, blends motivational self-help with preaching to millions. And then there's Benny Hinn, who travels the world performing what he calls miracles in stadiums packed with people desperate for hope. It was all connected: wealth, power, faith, and a promise that if you believed hard enough, gave enough, prayed enough, God would reward you. This was when I learned about the prosperity gospel, also known as the Word of Faith movement. Its premise is simple. God wants you to be rich, healthy, happy. Your faith is your tool, your donations are your seeds, and your prosperity is guaranteed if you obey. I remember watching Copeland defend his jets. God told me to have that plane, he said. It's a tool for ministry. And the audience nodded, many of them likely imagining themselves on the receiving end of similar blessings. I thought back to my childhood and verses I'd memorized in church. Jesus spoke about helping the poor, about storing treasures in heaven rather than on earth. And yet here was a world where the preachers themselves displayed the very wealth that, in other contexts, might have been called sinful. The mechanics of it are almost hypnotic. Followers are encouraged to sow their seed, to give, sometimes thousands of dollars, to the ministry. In return, they are promised financial blessings, healed relationships, even improved health. Kenneth Copeland Ministries called it harvesting the Gulfstream, a euphemism for donations funding his private jets. Creflo Dollar echoed it, telling his congregation that giving directly to him could secure divine rewards. This isn't just a U.S. phenomenon. David Oyedepo in Nigeria, reportedly worth $150 million, preaches the same prosperity theology. Social media amplifies it. Instagram accounts showing pastors in designer clothing, luxury watches, and expensive cars, positioning wealth as a sign of divine favor. The more I watched, the more I realized that prosperity preaching isn't just about faith, it's about spectacle. Benny Hinn's miracle crusades, for example, are like theater. Music swells, lights dim, crowds roar. People are invited on stage, sometimes with serious illnesses, sometimes hoping for a miracle. The energy is electric, and it's mesmerizing. But here's what I started to understand. Much of it isn't miraculous at all. It's psychology, suggestibility, expectation. When people are emotionally engaged, when they're surrounded by thousands who share the same belief, when they're primed to expect a miracle, the mind is capable of incredible things. Temporary relief, heightened sensations, even moments of euphoria. But real, permanent cures? Often, they never come. I remember a story from Hinn's crusade. A young boy named Oshniel, with massive brain tumors, was brought on stage. The crowd prayed. Benny Hinn laid hands on him, and everyone cheered. But days later, nothing had changed. Oshniel eventually passed away. Yet in the crowd, many left believing that miracles had occurred. Some blamed themselves. Their faith wasn't strong enough. It was here I realized the depth of what I was witnessing, hope exploited. Faith monetized, community and belief turned into a transaction. And the preachers? They weren't just preaching. They were orchestrating a spectacle designed to maximize donations while reinforcing the illusion that faith guarantees wealth and healing. And so I began asking myself, could this really be faith? Or was it something else entirely? It's complicated. Because I think many of these preachers genuinely believe in what they're doing. They might see their wealth as a tool, as Copeland claims. They might believe every miracle they perform. And yet the consequences are real. Millions of followers giving money they don't have, placing their trust in promises that often fail to materialize. This is the world of prosperity preaching. Lavish jets, glittering mansions, miracle crusades, and the promise that faith and money are intertwined. And for anyone watching from the outside, it's astonishing, surreal, sometimes infuriating, but impossible to ignore. Chapter 2. The Mega Churches. After I stumbled into the world of Kenneth Copeland, I started noticing something else. The scale. Not just the wealth of these preachers, but the size of their congregations, their reach, and their influence. These weren't small churches in quiet neighborhoods. These were mega churches, cathedrals of commerce disguised as houses of worship. By definition, a megachurch is any church with more than 2,000 weekly attendees. But in practice, these places often feel like stadiums. Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, led by Joel Osteen, is a prime example. Thousands gather every week, and millions more tune in via TV or online streaming. There's a band playing, lights pulsing, screens broadcasting the pastor's image across the room, and everyone is worshiping together, smiling, clapping, sometimes crying. It's a spectacle of devotion, and it's designed that way. Every element, the music, the preaching, the visual production is meant to generate emotion, to build a sense of unity, and to make the followers feel like part of something larger than themselves. It's hypnotic. But here's where things start to get murky. When I looked closer at the biggest figures in this world, Copeland, Benny Hinn, Jesse Duplantis, Creflo Dollar, David Oyedepo, I saw a common thread: wealth as proof of faith. If you're rich, healthy, and successful, they imply God has blessed you. If you're struggling, lacking, or sick, that's on you. A lack of faith, a failure to sow your seeds, a failure to trust. I remember watching Jesse Duplantis defend his private jet. He said, "If you knew what I knew, you'd understand why this plane is necessary." He spoke of ministry efficiency, of spreading God's word across countries. The audience nodded. Some even cheered. I couldn't help but imagine the thousands of dollars being donated in response to these words. Donations that could have been used for shelters, schools, or hospitals. But here, the plane, the mansion, the luxury car, it was all framed as divine necessity. And then there's Benny Hinn. I've seen clips of his miracle crusades. People brought on stage with illnesses, the crowd roaring with anticipation. Hinn waves his hand, lays hands on the sick, speaks a few words, and the crowd erupts. People fall backward, sometimes in shock, sometimes in joy. Cameras capture every moment. Music swells. It's an emotional roller coaster. But here's the thing. Many of these miracles are temporary. The boy in the wheelchair might get up for a moment, but hours later he's back in that chair. The adult claiming to have regained sight may not have improved at all. And when followers fail to see results, they blame themselves. They weren't faithful enough, generous enough, or righteous enough. I also discovered that some of these faith healings are staged, or at least manipulated by clever psychological techniques. Darren Brown, a mentalist, demonstrated this in his special Miracles for Sale. An ordinary man, Nathan, was trained to perform faith-healing tricks, making people fall back, temporarily relieving pain, even creating the illusion of a miracle, all without divine intervention. It worked because the audience's expectation was set. They believed, and in that moment, their minds convinced their bodies something extraordinary had happened. It made me question if Nathan, a regular person, could create the same emotional reactions. How many of Hinn's miracles were truly divine? How much of what we see is psychology, suggestion, and performance rather than spiritual intervention. And yet, the spectacle has real consequences. People donate money they cannot afford, sometimes to the point of financial hardship, in the hope of divine reward. They place trust in promises that are often unfulfilled, and the preachers, meanwhile, continue to live in opulence. Then there's the international angle. David Oyedepo, Nigeria's richest pastor, is reportedly worth $150 million. His church, Living Faith Church Worldwide, teaches prosperity theology just like Copeland or Dollar. His message is simple: give generously, and God will reward you. Followers, many from poor communities. Believe. They give. And Oyedepo lives in luxury. The pattern repeats across continents. America exports the model, Africa and Asia import it, and the cycle continues. It's a system that runs on hope, faith, and emotion, and it's incredibly effective. The megachurches are not just places of worship, they're engines of wealth, media power, and influence. They are, in a way, the perfect combination of religion and marketing. I remember visiting a clip from Lakewood Church. The camera pans over the audience, thousands of people, heads tilted, hands raised, faces radiant. Joel Osteen speaks about blessings, opportunity, and prosperity. He's smiling, calm, reassuring. You are destined for success, he says. And the audience believes. I found myself asking, at what point does faith become financial transaction? When does worship become investment? This is the heart of the prosperity gospel. It's not just a teaching about wealth, it's a promise. Obey, give, believe, and you will receive. The preachers display their wealth as proof. Their followers donate as evidence of faith, and the cycle repeats. It's persuasive, powerful, and, for many, irresistible. But beneath the glitter, beneath the jets, the mansions, the Rolexes, there's a darker reality. People give their money in hopes of healing, in hopes of blessings, in hopes of a miracle. Many receive nothing tangible. Some are left questioning their faith, blaming themselves for outcomes they cannot control. And yet, the preachers continue, their message celebrated, their wealth unquestioned. The megachurches are more than buildings. They are symbols of the prosperity gospel, living proof that the line between faith and commerce is not just blurred, it's erased. And as I watched these preachers and their empires unfold, I realized this isn't just about religion. It's about power, influence, and the human desire to believe in something bigger than ourselves. Chapter 3. Sowing Your Seed. Once I started following the trail of wealth and influence, I began to notice a recurring phrase in almost every sermon: sow your seed. It sounds poetic, almost biblical. But in the context of these megachurches and prosperity preachers, it has a very specific meaning. Give money, and God will give it back to you tenfold. The concept is deceptively simple. You send a donation, sometimes a modest sum, sometimes thousands of dollars, and the preacher assures you that God will bless you in return. Health, wealth, happiness, success, all of it is supposedly guaranteed if you have enough faith. The richer the donation, the more miraculous the promise. Creflo Dollar is infamous for this. In 2013, he asked his congregation to help fund a $65 million private jet. He called it a tool for ministry, but the sermon was framed as a divine investment. If you give to God, he said, God will multiply it back to you. The audience didn't just nod, they cheered, clapped, and pledged. Thousands, maybe millions of dollars flooded in. It was a spectacle of faith, emotion, and commerce all at once. Kenneth Copeland is no different. His ministry posted blogs thanking followers for helping them harvest a Gulfstream jet. And then, as if one jet weren't enough, they reminded donors there were still $17 million needed for hangars, runway upgrades, and maintenance. Every donation was framed as a spiritual act, a chance for believers to participate in God's work and secure blessings in return. And it's not just American preachers. David Oyedepo in Nigeria uses the same tactics. His sermons, books, and broadcasts all emphasize giving as the path to prosperity. Give so that you may be blessed, he tells his followers, many of whom are from impoverished backgrounds. It's a message that is optimistic, seductive, and profitable. The psychology behind it is clever. The act of giving, especially in a communal setting, strengthens commitment. The follower invests not just money, but emotion, hope, and identity. To pull back would feel like doubt or even disloyalty to God. And as the donations increase, the preacher's wealth grows. Private jets, mansions, luxury cars, and exotic vacations, all presented as proof that the system works. Joel Osteen takes a slightly different approach. He doesn't own a private jet, but his sermons and books are steeped in the same philosophy. His New York Times bestseller, Your Best Life Now, preaches the power of positive thinking, vision, and faith. It reads like a self-help book with a spiritual overlay. Your own wrong thinking can keep you from God's best. The connection between prosperity theology and modern self-help is clear. Both promise control over life's outcomes, both leverage hope and belief, and both sell the idea that you can manifest success if you follow the right steps. Benny Hinn takes the method a step further, combining faith healing with the sow your seed model. During miracle crusades, followers are urged to donate in exchange for divine intervention. A child in a wheelchair, a sick parent, a desperate family, all are presented as examples of faith needing financial expression. And when the miracle doesn't occur, the failure is rarely blamed on the preacher. Instead, the individual is told their faith wasn't strong enough, their seed insufficient, or some unseen curse has interfered. I remember watching footage from one of Hinn's events. A young boy named Ashnell was brought to the stage, his brain tumors leaving him in a vegetative state. The crowd roared as Hinn prayed over him. Cameras caught every second. Music swelled. And yet, 7 weeks later, the boy had passed away. The promise of divine intervention had failed. And yet, for many in the audience, faith remained unshaken. They attributed failure to human insufficiency, not the method itself. The logic of the prosperity gospel is insidious. It's structured so that donation is always rewarded, either in wealth, health, or spiritual fulfillment, or in the believer's mind, through self-blame if it fails. It's a system that preys on hope, vulnerability, and the human desire to believe that there is control, that effort, financial or otherwise, can bend the universe to your favor. And the method is highly performative. Hinn's crusades, Copeland's churches, Osteen's broadcasts, all are spectacles. Lights, music, camera angles, dramatic pauses, audience reactions. It's designed to create a sense of expectancy, a heightened emotional state where followers are most suggestible. In this state, donations feel not just natural, but necessary. They are an act of faith, a chance to participate in something divine. The sowing your seed doctrine also blurs the line between worship and commerce. Money becomes a medium of divine interaction. Tithing, which originally meant giving a portion of your wealth to sustain the community and its religious practices, has evolved into a transaction with promised personal benefit. The richer your offering, the greater the expected reward. And the preacher's lifestyles, private jets, multiple mansions, luxury cars act as living proof that the system works. It's a system built on emotion, spectacle, and psychology, reinforced by selective success stories. Followers see the wealthy, happy, and healthy preachers as proof of God's favor. Those who fail are quietly blamed or ignored. And as this model spreads, it becomes harder to distinguish faith from financial investment. This is why, when I watch these sermons, I feel a mixture of fascination and unease. On one hand, the gatherings are filled with hope, community, and purpose. People are connected, uplifted, and inspired. On the other, the system is designed to profit off belief, often at the expense of the most vulnerable. The megachurches, the luxury, the sow your seed promises, it's all part of a carefully constructed narrative. It's not just about God or spirituality, it's about influence, control, and profit. And the more I watched, the more I realized just how deep this rabbit hole goes, both in America and around the world. Chapter 4. The spectacle of miracles. As I delved deeper into the world of prosperity preachers, I realized it wasn't just about wealth, it was also about miracles, spectacle, and belief. And no preacher embodies this better than Benny Hinn. Known as the faith healer, Hinn fills stadiums worldwide, claiming to cure illnesses, restore sight, and perform the impossible, all through the touch of his hand and the power of prayer. I watched footage from one of his crusades, and it was immediately striking. The music swelled, lights dimmed, and the crowd rose as one. Hands lifted, eyes closed, hearts open. The atmosphere was electric, charged with hope and expectation. Hinn approached the stage, his presence commanding, his voice booming. "If you believe, you will be healed. Let God touch you today." People were brought forward, some in wheelchairs, others with visible injuries or ailments. The ritual was almost identical every time Hinn would lay hands on the individual, sometimes whispering words, sometimes wiggling his fingers dramatically, all while the crowd erupted in praise and tears. And for a fleeting moment, it seemed as if something miraculous had happened. A person might rise from a wheelchair, stretch, or stumble around, only to later return to their original state. This is where psychology enters the stage. These events are carefully choreographed to produce maximum emotional impact. The crowd is unified in hope, every person influenced by those around them. Social conformity, adrenaline, and the power of suggestion combine to create a trance-like, highly suggestible state. In this state, the brain can experience genuine physiological responses, temporary relief of pain, increased mobility, even sensations of healing, all without a true medical intervention. The power of expectation is immense. Known as the placebo effect, it's the phenomenon where belief alone triggers real changes in the body. And in Hinn's crusades, expectation is amplified to its peak. Surrounded by thousands of believers bathed in light and sound, participants are primed to feel God's presence. Every gesture, every word, every musical cue reinforces the idea that miracles are happening right now. I found an old documentary from HBO that followed families seeking healing. One boy, Ashnell, had 2 massive brain tumors. His parents brought him to Hinn's crusade, desperate for a miracle. Cameras captured the prayers, the emotional pleas, the communal hope. Hinn touched the boy, declared healing, and the crowd went wild. But weeks later, the boy had passed away. No miracle had occurred. And yet, the faith of many in attendance remained intact. They did not blame Hinn. They blamed a lack of faith, divine will, or unseen curses. I also learned about Justin Peters, an evangelist born with cerebral palsy. During the Fifth Estate's investigation into Hinn's ministry, Peters was intercepted by screeners when he tried to go on stage. These screeners are tasked with ensuring that only those who fit the miracle narrative appear before Hinn. Severe illnesses, chronic conditions, or situations that couldn't be miraculously healed were quietly screened out. What was presented as divine intervention was carefully curated, a show designed to maximize perceived success. Even seasoned insiders like Costahin, Hinn's own nephew, admitted to the choreography behind the scenes. He described living in luxury while assisting in creating the narrative of miracles. From mansions to exotic vacations, everything was carefully staged. The goal wasn't just faith, it was proof of divine favor. Proof that donations worked, proof that the prosperity gospel delivered. This pattern repeats across other faith healers as well. Todd White, for example, is known for the infamous leg growing trick. People with supposedly shorter legs are made to appear whole through simple sleight of hand techniques. Stage magic meets religious fervor, and the audience is none the wiser. The spectacle becomes reality because belief transforms perception. Darren Brown, a mentalist, even demonstrated this in his program, Miracles for Sale. He trained ordinary people to perform miracles in front of audiences using psychology, misdirection, and the power of suggestion. The parallels between Brown's techniques and the staged faith healings were undeniable. The effect on the audience is real, even if the miracle itself isn't. People walk away convinced they have witnessed something divine, leaving behind money, hope, and belief, a perfect loop feeding the preacher's system. It became clear that in the world of prosperity preachers, miracles are currency. They build trust, validate doctrine, and justify extravagance. Every healed person, every dramatic gesture, every crowd reaction reinforces the narrative: if you believe, if you give, if you follow, blessings will come. And if they don't, it's never the preacher's fault. The blame always shifts to the individual's lack of faith or their failure to sow the seed properly. As I watched more events and testimonies, I realized just how calculated it all is. The emotional highs, the staged miracles, the carefully managed donations, they all serve to create a self-sustaining ecosystem. Faith, spectacle, and wealth feed into each other, and the cycle repeats. Yet it's not all cynicism. The people who attend these events often leave with genuine hope, community, and emotional release. The power of belief is real. But when that belief is manipulated for profit, for personal gain, for show, that's when the system becomes dangerous, exploitative, and, at times, tragic. In the world of prosperity preachers, spectacle is king. Miracles are the currency. Faith is the vehicle, and donations are the lifeblood. Understanding the mechanics behind it doesn't diminish the experience for believers. It just exposes the way influence, psychology, and money intertwine with spirituality in a way few outsiders ever see. Chapter 5. The Global Spread of Prosperity. What started in the United States didn't stay there. The prosperity gospel has become a global phenomenon, reaching continents far beyond Texas and California. I found myself tracing its path to Africa, Europe, and Asia, countries where the promise of wealth, health, and divine favor resonates strongly, especially among communities struggling with poverty and instability. Nigeria is one of the most striking examples. David Oyedepo, founder of the Living Faith Church worldwide, is often cited as one of the wealthiest pastors in the world, reportedly worth over $150 million. His church, Dominion City, hosts thousands weekly and broadcasts to millions more. The doctrine he teaches mirrors what we saw in the U.S. Faith plus tithing equals blessings. We are not asking you to give so the church can be blessed, Oyedepo proclaims. We are asking you to give so you can be blessed. The message is clear. Money given is not charity. It's an investment in your personal prosperity. What struck me was the scale. Large auditoriums, fleets of vehicles, private jets. The infrastructure mirrors American megachurches almost exactly. And yet, the socioeconomic context is different. Many congregants live in extreme poverty. They donate a significant portion of their income, believing that it will transform their lives. The promise of miracles and wealth becomes a powerful motivator. The psychological effect is profound. Hope, combined with social pressure and religious authority, drives donations far beyond what might seem reasonable. But it isn't only Africa. Europe, too, has seen the influence of American prosperity preachers. Broadcasts from Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland, and others air on television and online, often translated into local languages. Immigrant communities in Europe, many of whom face economic hardship and social isolation, are drawn to these messages. Osteen's sermons, full of motivational language and personal anecdotes, appeal to those looking for encouragement and stability. The language is often indistinguishable from self-help or life coaching programs, except God is always invoked as the ultimate source of success. In Asia, prosperity preachers have adapted their teachings to local cultures. Churches in India, for example, have embraced the idea of sowing your seed, tying it to the promise of health, wealth, and business success. These teachings blend neatly with existing spiritual practices and cultural emphasis on karma, merit, and reward. It's a clever adaptation. The same principles, delivered in a culturally familiar language, become exponentially more persuasive. As I continued my research, I found a pattern. Wherever prosperity theology spreads, it attracts followers by promising certainty in an uncertain world. Faith, money, and miracles combine into a package that is psychologically irresistible. The human brain craves control, explanation, and hope, and prosperity preachers offer all three. Even if the promises aren't fulfilled, the act of giving and believing generates temporary emotional satisfaction, reinforcing the system. But the consequences are real. I read accounts of families going into debt to support church fundraisers, desperate for the promised breakthrough. People sold homes, borrowed money, or neglected basic needs to sow their seed in faith. The rhetoric of prosperity theology ensures that failure is never the fault of the preacher. It's a lack of faith, a misalignment with God, or failure to follow instructions precisely. The cycle of hope, giving, and disappointment repeats, often leaving emotional and financial scars. Yet, paradoxically, prosperity theology is often defended by its followers. Testimonials abound, stories of miraculous recoveries, unexpected financial windfalls, and dramatic life changes. Social media amplifies these narratives, creating viral proof of concept for others. One person's testimony of paying off debt after tithing becomes evidence for thousands more. The message spreads faster than any formal investigation could counteract it. Interestingly, many of these global preachers are well aware of the optics of wealth. Kenneth Copeland, for instance, frequently justifies his jets and mansions as necessary tools for ministry. "If I flew commercial, I couldn't do 65% of what I do," he says. But the reality is simpler. Lavish displays of wealth attract attention, validate the doctrine, and create a cycle of aspirational giving. From Africa to Asia to Europe, the formula is identical. Hope plus spectacle equals influence. The cultural export of prosperity theology also reflects larger American soft power. The language, style, and aesthetic of megachurches, from music to stage design to sermon delivery, have become recognizable worldwide. In a way, the U.S. is exporting a unique brand of spiritual capitalism, packaged as divine instruction. It's no longer just a local phenomenon in Houston or Fort Worth, it's a global industry. What's striking is how quickly this model adapts. In poorer countries, it often coexists with traditional beliefs, creating hybrid systems of spirituality. In wealthier regions, it blends seamlessly with motivational speaking and self-help culture. The core promise remains the same: faith plus giving equals personal prosperity. Everywhere it goes, it finds fertile ground. The consequences are twofold. On one hand, communities gain hope, social cohesion, and emotional uplift. On the other, the exploitation is profound. Money flows upward to preachers who display wealth as proof of their teachings. Those who cannot or do not receive the promised blessings often blame themselves. Faith becomes a tool of control. Belief becomes conditional. And the cycle continues, generation after generation. By the end of this chapter, one thing was clear. The prosperity gospel isn't just a U.S. problem, it's a global phenomenon. From Houston to Lagos to Mumbai, the same principles of spectacle, psychology, and promise of wealth spread unchecked. It's a system that feeds on hope, emotion, and faith, generating wealth and influence for a few while leaving others in a cycle of expectation and disappointment. The question remains, how do we confront something that is at once spiritual, psychological, and global in scale? And how can communities protect themselves from promises that exploit hope while masquerading as faith? As I traveled further into this story, I realized that the next chapter would need to explore the human cost of prosperity theology, the families, the believers, and the tragedies that often go unnoticed behind the lights and music of megachurches. Chapter 6. The Human Cost. Behind the glittering lights, the booming sermons, and the promises of divine wealth, there is a human story that often goes untold. The prosperity gospel thrives on hope. But what happens when that hope fails? Take the story of Ishmael, a 10-year-old boy with 2 massive brain tumors. His parents, recent immigrants to the United States, brought him to a Benny Hinn miracle crusade, believing that faith could save their child. On stage, Hinn laid his hands on Ishmael, shouted prayers, and assured the audience that God would touch him. The crowd cheered, hands raised, full of expectancy. But in the days that followed, nothing changed. Ashnail's condition remained the same, and within weeks, he passed away. His parents, devout believers, were left grappling with grief and confusion. They had been promised miracles, and yet the result was loss. Stories like Ashnell's are not rare. The pattern repeats across countless faith healing events. The person on stage may experience temporary relief, often a placebo effect fueled by adrenaline, heightened emotion, and social conformity, but long-term results are almost never guaranteed. For those whose conditions do not improve, the message of prosperity theology can be devastating. Failure is internalized. It is interpreted as a lack of faith, a personal flaw, or even a curse passed down through generations. Believers are trained to look inward for answers, rather than questioning the system or the preacher. Take Grace Bruller, an 8-year-old girl featured on CBC's The Fifth Estate in 2005. She was brought to Benny Hinn's ministry for healing. Just as she was about to go on stage, screeners intercepted her, part of a strategy insiders call stage management, ensuring only those likely to react in a compelling way are featured. This filtering is not unique to Hinn. It is common across large-scale faith healing operations. The spectacle of healing is curated. Those who are unlikely to display dramatic responses are sidelined, maintaining the illusion of miraculous success. Even Justin Peters, an evangelist born with cerebral palsy, was intercepted during an investigation. Despite wanting to participate, he was prevented from going on stage. These behind-the-scenes manipulations reveal that faith healing events are as much performance as they are religious ritual. The power is psychological, theatrical, and social, not divine. It's not only children or the disabled who are affected. Adults, desperate for solutions to chronic illness, financial hardship, or emotional trauma, are equally vulnerable. They witness a charismatic preacher, the crowd's euphoria, and the dramatic rituals, and they believe in the possibility of miracles. The effects are magnified by social proof. When everyone around you cheers, cries, and testifies, it becomes almost impossible to remain skeptical. The psychology behind it is fascinating and disturbing. When believers gather in a large crowd, unified by emotion and expectation, the brain enters a heightened state of suggestibility. The preacher acts as a conductor, orchestrating an emotional symphony. Hands raised, eyes closed, music swelling. All of this primes the audience to experience euphoria, temporary relief, or even physical symptoms like improved mobility. The phenomenon is akin to stage hypnosis. The effects are real, the emotional and physiological responses are measurable, but the cause is the mind, not a miracle. The placebo effect plays a major role. People expect change, their minds respond, and temporary improvement can occur. But the moment the euphoria fades, reality returns. Chronic conditions remain. Financial troubles persist. And yet prosperity theology teaches that these failures are personal. Perhaps you didn't give enough. Perhaps your faith isn't strong enough. Perhaps God has a different plan. The blame is always internal, never structural. This internalization can have lasting consequences. People may drain savings, sell possessions, or accrue debt to sow their seed, believing that wealth or healing will follow. Families may fall apart when financial promises fail. Emotional and spiritual trauma can linger for years. And yet, the spectacle continues. Preachers like Kenneth Copeland, Joel Osteen, Benny Hinn, and Creflo Dollar remain untouchable in the eyes of their followers. Their wealth is proof to believers that the system works. The human cost is magnified by media amplification. Social media is flooded with testimonials, videos, and images of dramatic recoveries. One person's brief success becomes a global example. Doubts and failures are invisible, buried behind the spectacle. The cycle perpetuates, hope attracts, donations fund more events, and the system thrives. Even when preachers like Benny Hinn attempt to step back from prosperity teachings, as he did in 2019, calling the commercialization of faith an offense to the Lord, the shift is often temporary. Once a ministry has amassed wealth, influence, and followers, changing direction becomes almost impossible. The system is self-sustaining. New preachers emerge to fill the void, often replicating the same promises, spectacle, and psychological manipulation. I interviewed former insiders, including Hen's own nephew, who described life behind the scenes: luxury mansions, guarded compounds, exotic vacations, and expensive shopping. They believed in the mission, truly did, but began questioning the contradictions between teachings and Scripture. They witnessed the curated miracle stories, the psychological manipulation, and the heavy pressure on congregants to give. Many left with lingering doubt and guilt. This is the paradox of the prosperity gospel. It offers hope while exploiting vulnerability, miracles while manufacturing spectacle, faith while enforcing obedience. It is a system that rewards the few at the top, while the majority shoulder the cost, financially, emotionally, and spiritually. As I delve deeper, I realize that the human cost isn't just individual, it's societal. Communities are impacted. Trust in genuine religious institutions can erode. Families may fracture under financial strain. And yet, the narrative continues to spread globally, untouched by criticism, investigation, or consequence, because for many believers, the promise is too powerful to resist. By the end of this chapter, the question isn't just about theology, or ethics, or spectacle. It's about real lives affected, children, the sick, the desperate, the hopeful. And the real challenge becomes this: how do we distinguish faith from exploitation? How do we protect the vulnerable while respecting belief? How do we confront a system that blends psychology, emotion, and spectacle in a way that feels divine? The next chapter will examine exactly that: the tools and strategies prosperity preachers use to maintain influence, the psychology behind belief, and how faith becomes inseparable from financial expectation. Chapter 7: Faith, Spectacle, and Manipulation. To understand prosperity preachers, it's not enough to look at wealth or claims of miracles. The real power lies in how they manipulate belief, perception, and emotion. These ministries operate like well-oiled machines, combining faith, theater, and psychology into an almost hypnotic experience. Take the structure of a mega-church service. A congregation gathers, sometimes thousands of people, in stadium-like venues. Music swells, lights dim, and preachers take the stage like rock stars. Joel Osteen is a master of this style. The audience isn't just listening, they are participating. They sing, they clap, they sway, they laugh. The sense of unity is intoxicating. It's not just religious devotion, it's group psychology at work. In this state, congregants are highly suggestible. Every word, gesture, and pause from the preacher is amplified. Promises of health, wealth, and divine favor aren't just statements. They are commands embedded in an emotionally charged environment. People are primed to believe. They leave feeling transformed, even if nothing has actually changed in their lives. The language used is deliberate. Prosperity preachers often frame their instructions as divine mandates. Giving money isn't a donation, it's a seed that will reap a harvest. Faith isn't just spiritual, it's transactional. Creflo Dollar tells his audience, "Increase your seed and watch what God will do." The implication is clear: obedience leads to tangible rewards. Failures, by contrast, are personal. If your health doesn't improve, if your finances don't grow, it's because your faith wasn't strong enough. You are to blame, not the system. The psychology of this is strikingly effective. Social proof plays a major role. When everyone around you is cheering, crying, or testifying, skepticism fades. The crowd reinforces belief. The spectacle itself, the music, the lights, the theatrics, creates a shared emotional experience that can feel divine. Even ordinary people can be persuaded that miracles are happening. This was demonstrated in Darren Brown's Miracles for Sale special. An ordinary man, Nathan, was taught to perform faith-healing miracles in front of a crowd. With no divine powers, no miracles, Nathan succeeded. He caused people to fall, feel relief, and even experience temporary improvements. The key? Emotional manipulation, expectation, and social conformity. The mechanics of the stage, the crowd, and the preacher's direction were enough to generate a convincing illusion of healing. Stage management is another critical tool. At Benny Hinn's events, insiders have described how participants are selected for stage appearances. People unlikely to respond dramatically are intercepted. Those who are chosen are often prepped, coached, and positioned for maximum effect. What the audience sees as a miracle is frequently a carefully curated performance. Grace Bruller, Justin Peters, and countless others experienced this firsthand. The miracle is not random, it is engineered. Props and theatrics extend beyond stage selection. Healers use dramatic gestures, pauses, and repetition to heighten suggestibility. Music swells at precise moments. Lighting and camera angles are manipulated in televised events to emphasize emotion. Even the crowd's reactions are timed. A wave of cheers, a unified response, a moment of collective awe. This is not just showmanship, it is psychological orchestration. And then there's the financial manipulation. Tithes and donations are framed as investments with guaranteed spiritual returns. A $1,000 donation becomes a seed, and believers are promised a harvest, improved finances, restored health, or personal blessings. The cycle feeds itself. Emotional highs make people more willing to give. The preacher's wealth becomes proof that the system works. Kenneth Copeland's Gulfstream jet, Creflo Dollar's Rolls-Royces, and Benny Hinn's luxurious lifestyle are presented as validation, not excess. But the consequences for the congregants are severe. Money is drained, debt accumulates, and hope is tied to compliance. When promises fail, as they inevitably do for most participants, guilt, shame, and self-blame follow. The system doesn't just sell faith, it sells the illusion of control over life's uncertainties. And when that illusion breaks, it is internalized, not questioned externally. Perhaps the most striking aspect of prosperity theology is its adaptability. It merges seamlessly with cultural trends, self-help philosophies, and social media. Joel Osteen's message, for example, mirrors motivational speaking, while social media amplifies testimonials, live streams, and viral videos of miraculous recoveries. The promise is global: health, wealth, and happiness through belief and obedience. It is tailored to each audience, yet consistent in its core strategy: inspire hope, manipulate emotion, and monetize faith. At the heart of this system is a paradox. The very human longing for hope and meaning is exploited. Believers attend services seeking connection, healing, or relief. What they receive is a highly engineered experience designed to elicit emotional, psychological, and financial responses. It's faith, yes, but faith guided by design, not divine intervention. The next chapter will explore the global expansion of this phenomenon. From Houston to Lagos, prosperity preachers export their message, their methods, and their spectacle. What started in the United States is now a worldwide system of wealth, influence, and psychological manipulation, and as it spreads, the human cost multiplies. Chapter 8: Global Reach and Human Cost. The story of prosperity gospel isn't confined to the United States. What began in megachurches across Texas, Florida, and California has spread far beyond American borders. Preachers like Kenneth Copeland, Creflo Dollar, Joel Osteen, and Benny Hinn have exported their message, broadcasting it across continents, from Africa to Asia. The impact is profound, both culturally and financially. Take Nigeria, for example. David Oyedepo, often called the richest pastor in Africa, is reported to be worth over $150 million. His church, Living Faith Church Worldwide, boasts massive auditoriums, private jets, and luxury vehicles. Congregants here are promised divine favor in exchange for their tithes and donations, the same Sow Your Seed system pioneered in the U.S. But for many attendees, the promise of prosperity remains elusive. Families give months of income to the church, hoping for blessings, only to find themselves in greater financial strain. This exportation is not just financial, it's psychological and cultural. Prosperity theology appeals to universal human desires: security, health, family, and status. In communities struggling with poverty, disease, and instability, the message is seductive. Give to God, and God will give to you, preachers declare. In environments of scarcity, hope becomes a currency, and faith is framed as a transaction. The spectacle follows, just as it does in Houston. Music, lights, and drama draw believers into a collective emotional experience. People fall, cry, and shout. Testimonies of miraculous healings, sudden wealth, or restored marriages flood social media, creating the illusion of widespread success. The imagery is compelling. A poor farmer, a struggling mother, or a sick child suddenly blessed through obedience. It's a narrative designed to reinforce the system and encourage further donations. Yet, the reality is often devastating. Investigations in countries like Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana reveal families sold into debt, children denied education, and communities deprived of resources that could have been better invested in schools, hospitals, or local businesses. Many congregants interpret failure to receive blessings not as a flaw in the system, but as a personal deficiency, insufficient faith, spiritual weakness, or generational curses. The cycle of hope and guilt continues, making believers susceptible to manipulation. In Asia, similar patterns emerge. Televised services, translated books, and online sermons bring prosperity theology to millions in India, the Philippines, and beyond. In Manila, mega-churches like Christ's Commission Fellowship have adopted techniques strikingly similar to American preachers. Music, theatrics, and emotional storytelling are used to foster belief. Followers are taught that their donations can unlock divine favor, and the richest churches often present evidence of wealth, private jets, luxury vehicles, and opulent church facilities as proof of God's blessing. Even more concerning is how technology amplifies influence. Social media platforms, streaming services, and YouTube channels allow preachers to reach audiences that have never set foot in a physical church. Followers engage via live streams, sending donations online, sharing testimonies, and participating virtually in miracle services. In a sense, prosperity theology has become a global digital ecosystem, emotionally immersive, culturally adaptable, and financially lucrative. The human cost, however, is harder to quantify. Unlike American audiences who may have access to legal recourse or regulatory oversight, international followers often have fewer protections. Scams, fraud, and misrepresentation thrive in countries with less regulatory scrutiny. Faith becomes currency, hope becomes collateral, and vulnerability becomes a tool for financial gain. For many, the prosperity gospel is not a spiritual blessing, it is a trap disguised as salvation. And yet, the system perpetuates itself. Graduates of mega churches often become pastors themselves, replicating the model locally. Young evangelists observe the wealth of their mentors, the jets, the mansions, the luxury vehicles, and see it as proof that the method works. They adopt the same language, the same spectacle, the same promises. The cycle continues, endlessly self-replicating. Critics like John Piper and watchdog organizations such as the Trinity Foundation have tried to combat the spread. They expose discrepancies, challenge false miracle claims, and warn communities about financial exploitation. Yet their reach is limited, particularly internationally. The allure of immediate wealth, health, and happiness often outweighs skepticism. At its core, the global expansion of prosperity gospel reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. In times of uncertainty, people will seek control, security, and hope. The promise of divine reward for obedience is irresistibly simple, emotionally compelling, and universally appealing. Preachers who understand these dynamics, whether knowingly or unconsciously, can wield extraordinary influence. The question remains, what is the ultimate cost of this influence? Beyond money lost, there is psychological harm. Faith becomes transactional rather than transformative. Hope is contingent upon compliance rather than unconditional belief. People are taught to blame themselves for their failures, deepening cycles of guilt, shame, and vulnerability. Yet despite this, prosperity gospel thrives, it adapts, it travels, it evolves, and as long as people desire certainty in an uncertain world, it will continue to find new audiences. The next chapter will examine the mechanics of so-called miracles and faith healing, the spectacle behind the stage, the science of suggestion, and the psychology that turns ordinary people into believers of extraordinary claims. Chapter 9. The Miracle Machine. In the heart of Texas, under dazzling lights and booming music, a stage is set. Thousands gather in anticipation, all eyes on the preacher. The air is thick with expectancy. For believers, this is a place where the impossible becomes possible, a place where God can intervene directly in human affairs. For outsiders, it is a carefully orchestrated performance. Benny Hinn is perhaps the most infamous name associated with faith healing. Stadiums packed with tens of thousands of attendees watch as he claims to channel divine power, curing the sick and restoring the broken. Hands are raised, tears are shed, and the crowd erupts in ecstatic praise. People fall backward, seemingly lifted by the invisible hand of God, and catchers rush to prevent injury. It's a spectacle that looks miraculous, almost cinematic, but the reality behind the curtain is far more complex. Insiders reveal a different story. Costi Hinn, Benny Hinn's nephew and former assistant, described life behind the scenes. 10,000 square foot mansions, Mercedes-Benz vehicles, luxury vacations. And the work? Creating the perfect show. Every miracle was choreographed, every fall rehearsed. The goal wasn't just healing, it was generating belief, engagement, and donations. The psychology is precise. From the moment attendees enter, they are immersed in an environment engineered for suggestibility. Music rises and falls to stir emotion. Lights flash, videos play, and testimonies of past miracles flood screens. The collective energy of thousands amplifies emotions, creating a trance-like state. This is no accident. It's social hypnosis, a phenomenon where the mind becomes highly suggestible in groups. Once the crowd is primed, the preacher begins. A sick child is brought forward, a wheelchair is wheeled onto the stage. The audience holds its breath. The healer touches, prays, or gestures. And for a moment, something extraordinary seems to happen. The child rises, the wheelchair is abandoned, and the crowd cheers. But often, hours later, reality returns. Some patients relapse, some conditions persist, and families are left reconciling hope with disappointment. Darren Brown, a British mentalist, famously tested this in his TV special Miracles for Sale. He took an ordinary man, Nathan, and trained him to perform faith healing in front of a small audience. Using nothing but psychological suggestion, expectation, and the emotional power of the crowd, Nathan created the illusion of miracles. People fell backward, convulsed, and reported healing, all without divine intervention. The implication is clear. The mechanics of faith healing are as much psychological as spiritual. Heightened emotion, social conformity, and expectancy can trigger real physical sensations, temporary relief, adrenaline-fueled energy, or even temporary mobility. But these effects are indistinguishable from placebo. The brain, conditioned to expect divine intervention, convinces the body that it has received it. Take Todd White's infamous leg-growing trick. A preacher identifies someone whose legs appear unequal in length. With a few gestures and subtle shoe adjustments, the leg seems to grow before the audience's eyes. Spectators, caught in the heightened emotional state, perceive a miracle. Repeat this thousands of times across thousands of people, and the illusion becomes part of the narrative. A modern stage magic disguised as divine power. Even more complex are the ongoing claims of long-term healing. Big Nick, a former social media personality, attended a Benny Hinn-style event in Texas. He presented with a blind left eye. After the performance, he was told to recite passages from the Bible nightly for healing. Months later, there was no improvement. And yet, the belief remained intact, both in him and in the audience that witnessed it. This is the heart of the placebo effect. Expectation shapes perception, and perception shapes belief. The consequences, however, are more than theoretical. Families invest heavily, financially, emotionally, spiritually, in these events. When miracles fail, the burden is placed on the individual. You didn't have enough faith, they are told. Guilt and shame replace hope. People who attend these services may come seeking health, relief, or answers, and instead leave blaming themselves for divine neglect. It's not always deception in the traditional sense. Many preachers truly believe in their own abilities, but belief does not erase the ethical implications. When thousands of lives, millions of dollars, and genuine suffering intersect with performative displays of divine power, the line between faith and exploitation blurs. Yet for believers, the spectacle reinforces itself. The more dramatic the performance, the stronger the conviction. Social proof, seeing thousands around you worshiping, crying, and testifying, reinforces belief. Even failed miracles are interpreted as spiritual lessons, tests of faith, opportunities for growth, or evidence of divine mystery beyond human understanding. Faith healing, then, is both a religious and psychological phenomenon. It is an interplay of suggestion, expectation, emotion, and spectacle. It is powered by community, amplified by social conformity, and justified by spiritual narrative. And most importantly, it is extremely difficult to question from within the system. To doubt is to risk spiritual condemnation. In the next chapter, we'll explore the most controversial element of prosperity theology: money. How preachers convert faith into currency, turning hope into donations, and creating a global system where wealth, spectacle, and spirituality intersect in ways that continue to shock, fascinate, and exploit. Chapter 10. The Business of Faith. If you think the spectacle of faith healing is astonishing, wait until you step into the world of prosperity gospel. Here, faith is not only a spiritual currency, it is literal money, and the scale at which it operates is staggering. Take Kenneth Copeland. His ministry, Kenneth Copeland Ministries, runs one of the largest networks of televangelism in America. In 2008, Copeland took possession of a $12 million Gulfstream jet funded entirely by his followers. On the ministry's website, he described it as a harvest, thanking congregants for helping him acquire the plane. The reality? That plane was just one of several jets, part of a personal fleet that enables Copeland to travel globally, spreading his message and generating more donations. Jesse Duplantis, another Texas-based preacher, famously appeared alongside Copeland to justify his own private jet purchases. And then there's Creflo Dollar, whose ministry owns multiple Rolls-Royces and sprawling real estate, funded by his congregation's tithes. Each sermon, each televised broadcast, each social media post is carefully engineered to encourage giving. And not just small donations, large donations. The message is consistent: sow your seed, and God will return it to you multiplied. The teachings behind this model are simple and seductive. Known as prosperity theology or the Word of Faith movement, it preaches that God wants believers to be wealthy in every sense: financially, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Faith, obedience, and generous giving unlock these blessings. Followers are told that their donations are not only acts of worship, but direct investments in their own prosperity. Stephanie from Maryland wrote to one preacher describing her experience. She gave her first seed offering and soon after received $2,400. To her, it was proof that the system worked. To skeptics, it's a mechanism of psychological reinforcement. Each donation that produces a small, coincidental return strengthens belief. Each miracle, real or perceived, validates the system. And those who don't see results, they are often blamed, not the ministry. It's a sophisticated blend of psychology, religion, and marketing. The act of giving becomes ritualized. Sermons feature calls to action, urging attendees to donate online, by phone, or in person. Screens flash with instructions. Click here to sow your seed of $1,144 today. Music swells. The preacher's charisma is amplified by applause and visible participation. The crowd is immersed in a feedback loop where emotion and action reinforce each other, creating both a spiritual and financial harvest. Joel Osteen, Houston's most famous pastor, doesn't just preach, he builds an empire. His church, Lakewood Church, broadcasts to millions worldwide. Osteen's books, including Your Best Life Now, combine motivational self-help messaging with biblical references, encouraging believers to envision and claim their personal success. This isn't just preaching, it's coaching, marketing, and fundraising rolled into one. But the financial rewards for the preachers are extraordinary. The money funds not only luxurious personal lifestyles, homes with dozens of chandeliers, private jets, exotic vacations, but also their media empires. The cycle is self-perpetuating. Money funds outreach, outreach generates belief, belief generates donations, and donations fund more spectacle. And the reach isn't limited to the United States. American prosperity theology has been exported to Africa, Asia, and Europe. Nigeria's David Oyedepo, reportedly worth over $150 million, preaches the same message: give to be blessed. Ministries across continents mirror the Texas model, blending local culture with American-style megachurch spectacle. Ethically, this raises questions. The poorest are often the most fervent followers, giving significant portions of their income in hopes of divine return. The promise of blessings can become a powerful motivator, one that overrides critical thinking. And because the preachers often genuinely believe in their message, the line between spiritual guidance and exploitation is blurred. Yet the prosperity gospel thrives because it delivers hope. In communities struggling with poverty, illness, and hardship, the promise that faith and giving can lead to abundance is compelling. For many, these preachers are not merely spiritual leaders but symbols of possibility. Their opulence, paradoxically, serves as proof of God's favor, and by extension, proof that the system works. Critics, however, see a darker reality. John Piper and the Trinity Foundation, led by Ole Anthony, have spent decades investigating and exposing abuses in televangelism. Their work documents how donations are leveraged to fund extravagance, how miracle claims are staged, and how vulnerable believers can be manipulated. These watchdogs remind us that faith, when intertwined with unchecked capitalism, becomes a powerful tool, not always for good. Even when preachers like Benny Hinn publicly criticize the excesses of prosperity theology, the system persists. The infrastructure is massive. Media networks, social media channels, international ministries, and devoted congregations ensure that the model is self-sustaining. When one preacher steps back, another rises to take their place. The message is too simple, too seductive, and too lucrative to disappear. And it works. Donations continue to flow. Followers testify to miracles, financial returns, and personal blessings. The system validates itself to believers while generating extraordinary wealth for a few. It's a mechanism as old as organized religion but turbocharged by modern media, psychology, and capitalism. In the end, prosperity theology is a study in contradiction, a religion promising divine blessings through human wealth, performed on stages that look more like entertainment venues than houses of worship. It leverages hope, belief, and the human desire for certainty in an uncertain world. It delivers emotional highs, moments of awe, and a sense of community, and all of it comes at a cost, paid in dollars, faith, and sometimes broken expectations. The next chapter will examine the ethics and psychology of faith healing more deeply, asking the most difficult question: when miracles fail, who bears the burden? And why do millions continue to believe, even when the evidence suggests otherwise?